Revealed, Undercover Millionaire discovers inspiring waitress sleeping in booth, a transformative encounter that will change lives. Sarah's exhaustion weighed heavily on her, the diner fading into a blur of half-remembered conversations and the clanging of pots. She deserved one last cup of coffee, her feet sore and her mind numb. Caving to fatigue, she curled against a stack of menus in the booth, an unspoken plea for rest. In that moment, her struggles eclipsed the laughter and warmth that usually filled the little diner. A world of ambition lay just beyond her reach, and the cost of pursuing it mounted higher each day. For a fleeting instant, she slipped into sleep, surrendering the restless routine that consumed her life. She dreamed of lectures on anatomy and late-night study sessions, the life of a medical student she yearned for, clashing violently against the reality of her day-to-day grind. That dream filled her with an aching hope, but also an unambiguous sense of doom. Could someone like her, even with anguish etched into every line of her face, ever hope to break free from a cycle that threatened to engulf her? All she could see were walls closing in, just as heavy as her grandmother's illness weighed upon her. The financial burden strangled her ability to reach for the light of possibility. Jake sat in a nearby booth, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the eclectic diner atmosphere. He watched Sarah, her fragile beauty drawn tight with responsibility. He was captivated, not just by her resilience but by the undeniable spark of potential emitted even in her darkest moments. But he was there on false pretenses, immersing himself in the lives of those he had never truly known. Each time he caught her eye, a small, tumultuous part of him wrestled with guilt. Who was he to intrude on her struggles? Her determination stirred something beyond mere curiosity, an ethical dilemma that twisted within him. Should he unmask himself as a successful entrepreneur and leverage those resources to help her? His heart drummed an uneasy rhythm. He could see the path to that prestigious scholarship she whispered about in exhaustion-fueled conversations, but it required risking everything he had built. Circumstances straddled the line of moral peril. Would she feel betrayed if he admitted to lying about his true identity? All he'd wanted was to step outside his bubble, to feel the grit and grind of real hardship. Yet, witnessing Sarah's pursuit of her goals made Jake acutely aware of every privilege in his life. Each dollar he casually spent, a chain link that bound them to separate worlds. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension of his deception compressed like a fist in his chest. As Sarah stirred from her brief slumber, blinking against the diner light, an unease crept into him. She was living in unvarnished reality, and the struggles of her life pulled at him with a ferocity he couldn't ignore. The dreams of a better life she shared weighed on him just as much as the truth he withheld. If he reached out, offered that lifeline, would he be diminishing the value of her own achievements? Just as hope seemed ready to blossom, Jake's phone buzzed to life, a message from a former associate threatening exposure. The stakes had just climbed higher. Caught within a storm of uncertainty, Jake felt the walls of resolution closing in. Would he dare to confront his own privilege and risk revealing the truth, or would he shy away from the burgeoning connection, perhaps lose Sarah forever? Somewhere in the tumult, a whisper echoed within him: if he was to gain her trust, he would need to embrace the very future he feared. Sarah awoke to the soft murmurs of the diner, the familiar sounds now tinged with a sense of urgency. She pushed herself up and shook off the drowsiness, her mind racing through the challenges of the day ahead. Each passing moment magnified her unresolved dreams, anchoring her again to the burden of her responsibilities. Yet, with the faint hope of a medical career bubbling within her, she wrestled against fatigue, promising herself she would not let another day slip away unpursued. As she began her routine, refilling coffee cups and polishing cutlery, her focus honed in on the young couple in the corner booth celebrating an anniversary, laughter punctuating their playful conversations. A pang of envy flared deep inside her, their happiness illuminated a path she longed to tread. Sarah gripped the edge of the counter, steadying her thoughts. What started as a whisper of doubt now roared within her. Could she genuinely access the life she envisioned? In a moment that caught her by surprise, Sarah lifted her gaze and locked eyes with Jake. He sat there, a surreal juxtaposition in his crisp suit against the diner-esque casual aesthetics. What did he see when he looked at her? She was no stranger to judgment, but there was an intensity in his gaze that sparked something unnameable within her, a flicker of possibility. Jake smiled softly, yet the warmth didn't fully reach her. She could feel the layers of pretense smothering their connection. The moment fell away, leaving her with her thoughts. She needed to face her fears head-on and access the resources hidden in the depths of her routine. That night's shift offered her an idea. If she networked just right, perhaps she could connect with someone who could guide her to scholarships or professional opportunities. Determination surged. She would give this job purpose beyond survival. If she was going to pull herself up, it had to come from her strength, her fighting spirit. The diner buzzed with life, and amidst talking customers, Sarah noticed an elderly gentleman struggling to pick up his change as it slipped from the table edge. She rushed to assist, managing to balance a few coins in her palm before returning them. As she placed the money in his weathered hand, he looked up at her, his eyes gleaming with warmth. "Thank you, dear. You never know the impact of kindness until it finds you in a tough spot," he said, his voice soft yet firm. For a moment, inflation of self-worth coursed through her. She had made a difference. Perhaps she could embody the change she sought, not just as a medical student in the making, but as someone capable of uplifting others even in small ways. A memory sparked somewhere in her, nudging her toward advocacy for healthcare in her community. Suddenly, the contours of her ambitions sharpened. She could not only transform her life but potentially shape the lives of others too. But to reach that dream, she needed to cultivate connections. That evening, her resolve concluded with a set of determined steps. She sought out conversations in the diner, not just about orders and tips but about human stories, hoping to uncover experiences she could learn from, paths she might follow. As Sarah positioned herself behind the counter, she caught Jake watching her intently. An idea gripped her reluctance. What if he also carried insights into the world she desired to enter? Instinctively, she sensed an opportunity, but what if he was hiding something that would challenge everything she was building towards? The question lingered, igniting a tumult of emotions. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were each carrying hidden truths, perhaps even scars of their own. Would she dare to step closer to him, risking her newfound resolution for a connection that might jeopardize everything she aimed to achieve? As that tension loomed between them, Sarah prepared to make a decision that could redefine her journey. With every beat of her heart, she sensed a threshold drawing near, a moment that could either shatter or solidify her dreams. The air in the diner felt thick with expectation, and Sarah's pulse quickened. She stood, hands trembling slightly as she debated the merit of pursuing this nascent connection with Jake. Each moment spent hesitating stoked the fire of potential regret, yet the fear of distraction loomed larger. This was not merely about her, it was about fostering the future she embarked on. With unyielding determination, she forced herself to drag in a breath, stalling the ticking clock of indecisiveness. The familiar sound of the diner's clinking cutlery and laughter faded into the background, narrowing her concentration solely on Jake. What if this was a pivotal moment? Could engaging him lead to insights that would propel her progress forward? With a calculated shift in her stance, she approached his table, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm. "Hi, Jake," she began, letting the tremor in her voice speak to her unease. "How's your day been?" The innocence of the question belied the urgency hidden in her gaze. His smile was genuine, and Sarah's uncertainty began to wane, if only slightly. "It's been good," he replied, folding his hands together as he leaned back. "But I feel like I'm missing out on something interesting." The vulnerability in his response pierced through her hesitation, threading a connection that urged her forward. This was her entry point, she had to seize it. "You might find it's right here," she replied, her tone steadier than her insides felt. Jake tilted his head slightly, an inquiry lighting his eyes. "Are you suggesting I get into the life of a waitress, then?" Her smile deepened, revealing a shard of her newfound confidence. "More like a storyteller. The people who come in here hold some fantastic narratives." She gestured toward various customers, subtly weaving their shared humanity into the tapestry of her words. "Like the elderly gentleman who I just helped, he shared the impact of kindness in tough situations." Jake leaned closer. "You seem to take your job very seriously. Most people would just show up to clock in and clock out." The challenge in his gaze resonated with her ambition. "Why shouldn't I? Every experience is an opportunity." The words spilled from her, fueled by a blend of passion and purpose.
If she could keep him engaged, who knows what doors might open.
That's a unique perspective, he acknowledged, nodding thoughtfully.
It reflects a drive that's rare.
His response ignited waves of excitement within her, but she was acutely aware of hidden uncertainties.
What did he seek from her? Was there an ulterior motive behind his interest?
The echoes of potential disappointment thrummed at the back of her mind.
May I ask what you do, Jake?
She inquired, hoping to peel back layers of his facade as he had begun to expose hers.
He hesitated.
I work in finance, he answered slowly, guarding details with precision. But right now, I'm trying to figure out my next steps. That shared uncertainty struck a chord.
Their paths might not be as divergent as she initially thought. Maybe we can help each other, she ventured.
You could share insights about finance, and I can provide you with some stories that might change how you see success. A flicker of intrigue crossed his face, but it was short-lived, replaced with an adroit caution.
You'd have to trust me for that to happen. Trust.
The word echoed within her, summoning both ambition and trepidation.
Could she lower her guard enough to invite this man into her journey?
The vision of her future felt precariously balanced on the decision she might make right now.
The moments lingered, drawing tension thick enough to cut with a knife. She pondered the question of vulnerability. Would she risk losing sight of her goals for potential camaraderie or worse, betrayal? Yet some truth struck her again. To elevate herself, she had to embrace relationship building despite the reservations. I think it's worth a shot, she answered, a pulse of conviction surfacing.
But once the words had taken flight, an unsettling thought gripped her.
Maybe Jake wasn't just a random connection. What if he held the keys to reality she had long been denied? Would unlocking his truth expose her own?
As Sarah made her decision, she felt the weight of impending challenges silently weaving through their exchange. What truths lay hidden beneath his carefully constructed exterior, and how might they shape her own burgeoning path? The seminal moment to confront both their realities beckoned, and with it, the pivotal choice ahead loomed larger than ever. The air between them crackled with possibilities, charged by the unspoken desires of two individuals wrestling with their futures. Sarah steadied herself, forcing her thoughts to focus.
What was truly at stake here? She considered the delicate balance of trust, acknowledging the excitement sparking within her.
It was more than a connection, it was an opportunity for growth, to learn from each other, to break from their individual cycles of uncertainty.
What do you have in mind?
Jake asked, breaking the contemplative silence. He leaned forward, his considerately tapered brows furrowing as he sought clarity from her hesitant resolve.
Maybe we start with a conversation?
The suggestion rolled off her tongue, laced with eagerness and a calculated hint of challenge.
I have stories that might make you think differently about your path. In return, some of your insights into finance could guide my ambitions.
His smile faltered just a hint, revealing shadowed layers behind his calm demeanor.
You think storytelling can compete with numbers and projections? The challenge struck a nerve. There was an edge of derision she hadn't expected.
Her instinct kicked in, sharpening her determination.
Absolutely. Every figure represents a person or a dream.
The narratives weave the fabric of success. It's not just about dollars and cents.
Jake's posture shifted slightly, interest piqued. You view finance as personal?
In a way, yes, she replied, her voice slicing through the tension.
You might confine it to spreadsheets, but I see the human stakes behind every data point.
Your decisions impact lives. And those lives have invaluable stories that shape those numbers. His gaze searched her face, as if gauging the sincerity that radiated in her conviction.
You're passionate, he admitted, that blend of admiration and skepticism resurfacing. But what if the reality is more cut and dry? What if your stories don't align with the hard facts? Sweat formed at the edges of Sarah's palms.
It felt like a direct challenge, forcing her to reaffirm her stance. Then I adapt, she countered, her voice emboldened by the conviction that pulsed within her. Adapting to change, learning, evolving, those are the keys to thriving, Jake. I refuse to let fear dictate my journey. A slow nod signaled Jake's acknowledgement of her fierce display.
That's quite a mindset. He shifted, leaning back slightly as if contemplating her proposal. And how exactly do you plan to adapt? Sarah considered his question carefully. By absorbing knowledge. Every conversation, every shared insight propels us forward. We're not alone in this pursuit. I'm here, willing to learn and collaborate, but I need you to be open too. Jake appeared momentarily thoughtful. Could this initial spark between them manifest into something deeper, a network of mutual understanding? Yet, doubt flickered in his expression as he shifted again. Trust doesn't come easily, you know. I'm aware. The words were firm. But if we hold back, we lose opportunities. You've taken the first step by talking to me. An unanticipated smile broke his contemplative facade. Fair point. You know, I wasn't looking to connect with anyone. And yet here we are. Her response sneaked past her thoughts and rendered her increasingly aware of her own boldness. Awareness flooded through them, intensifying the air thick with possibility. Jake's hesitant guard lowered ever so slightly, walls stood at times, but the shared space pulsed with new opportunities. Sarah felt her heart race, recognizing the importance of champions in change. Whether found or sought, they sat in comfortable silence, a tentative ceasefire. Trust began an intricate dance, each beat measured and cautious. Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling of this moment echoing through future interactions, reverberating promises and unforeseen challenges awaiting them both. With that thought pulsing in her mind, a fear crept in, the threat of vulnerability juxtaposed against their milestone moment. Would allowing him access to her journey unravel the delicate fabric she'd so carefully woven? As if. Sensing her internal struggle, Jake broke the silence, his voice low. So what's next? A surge of determination revived her pulse. Sarah realized she had walked through the door of possibility. Next, we create a plan built on trust and courage. Once again, she felt the weight of expectation settle, yet deeper than that, it was the thrill of discovery. They were on the cusp of unraveling each other's narratives, two paths intersecting at a pivotal junction. But would the journey strengthen them, or would the revelations uncover more than they anticipated? As she met Jake's gaze, a new question emerged for Sarah. What secrets lay buried behind his guarded facade, waiting to surface, intertwining their chances of success? Sarah felt a flutter of unease deep within as she considered the magnitude of their next step. She sensed the potential for something transformative, not just for her career ambitions but for her emotional landscape as well. The air around them buzzed with the promise of growth, a palpable reminder that every decision made here could alter the trajectory of their lives. As she gathered her thoughts, she decided to take the lead. Jake, let us identify what we need to accomplish and how we can support each other. Her voice was steady, yet beneath it pulsed a current of vulnerability. This was unfamiliar territory where her emotional investment was equally as important as their professional development. Jake nodded, his expression shifting into one of focus. Okay, let us break it down. What are your immediate goals? The intensity of his gaze seemed to pull her into a rhythm where time slowed, and clarity emerged. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the moment. I'm at a point where I want to transition from merely surviving in my job to thriving in a career that fulfills me. I need to understand not just the narratives I'm constructing but also the financial elements that underpin those stories. He leaned in slightly, absorbing her words. And how do you envision that? What do you want from me? There was no hint of condescension in his tone, only a quiet respect that made her feel like an equal in this exchange. I need your insights, she admitted, her eyes locked onto his. You understand the financial world inside and out. I want to learn the essentials of analysis and projection so I can write my stories with a stronger foundation. She hesitated, contemplating how vulnerable she felt expressing her professional inadequacies. I don't want to just be a waitress with dreams, I want to capture opportunities and elevate myself. He considered her for a moment, his brow furrowing in thought. You're right about finance being more than just numbers. He paused, shifting gears in his mind. But it's also about strategy. If you want to elevate your game, you need to learn how to structure a plan that not only resonates with your values but also aligns with market realities. The way he spoke made her feel ignited with inspiration. She could sense how their dynamic was evolving. He was challenging her to transcend her comfort zone. What do you suggest?
she asked, eager to absorb anything he was willing to offer. He seemed to reflect on a well of knowledge before speaking.
First, I'd recommend that you start with a financial literacy course. There are plenty available online that will give you a solid foundation.
While you learn the basics, we can merge that knowledge with your storytelling to develop a compelling pitch for future opportunities, possibly in the creative sectors that interest you.
Creative sectors?
She tilted her head, intrigued.
Absolutely. People are always searching for innovative ways to engage with finances. Connection storytelling can offer. You might just differentiate yourself in a saturated job market.
His earnestness was contagious, urging her to believe he could genuinely see her potential.
Then, what's next for you, Jake? She asked.
As she sought to turn the tables, she hoped to learn more about him.
What drives your ambition, beyond just finance? What's your story?
That question hung heavily in the air, and she observed a flicker of something behind his eyes, a stormy uncertainty veiled beneath the confident exterior. He resisted her gaze, turning it inward as he hesitated, seemingly torn between divulging too much and keeping his secrets guarded.
It's a long story, he finally murmured, the weight of his words reflecting an unspoken urgency. But I think it might be time to share.
Sarah's heart raced at the prospect of peeling back layers from his guarded facade. The tension between them escalated. This was a crossroads not just for her ambitions, but for the trust they were beginning to forge. Would he be willing to open up? Would his revelations lead to unraveling the complexity of their intertwined paths, or perhaps reveal conflicts that would challenge her even further? The moment hung heavy with unspoken possibilities, and Sarah realized this could either fortify their bond or fracture the precarious trust they'd begun to build. She steadied herself, ready for whatever was to come, but questions loomed larger than before. What would Jake reveal, and how would that shift the landscape of their budding collaboration? Sarah's mind buzzed, not just with anticipation but with a kaleidoscope of emotions. The demands of their conversation required her to remain focused, yet the prospect of unraveling Jake's story loomed like a specter at the edge of her consciousness. Every moment stretched, revealing both the promise of deeper connection and the threat of vulnerability. As Jake shifted in his seat, she sensed a mutual reluctance to break the spell of their shared space. His posture hinted at introspection, a slow battle of decisions playing out behind his eyes. She found herself drawn toward him, eager to bridge the divide, yet acutely aware of her own precariousness in this unfolding narrative.
What I'm trying to say, he began, finally meeting her gaze, is that I didn't always have it easy.
I've struggled with expectations, mine, and those imposed by others.
His confession hung in the air, infused with an honesty that made Sarah's chest tighten.
Go on, she urged, her voice a whisper. He hesitated again, and it struck her how this moment mirrored her own earlier vulnerability. Just like she had yearned to articulate her ambitions, Jake was on the cusp of revealing the building blocks of his identity. I grew up in a family that prioritized financial success, but they often overlooked the personal cost, he continued, a flicker of passion igniting in his voice. I felt I was continuously chased by their ambitions rather than being encouraged to pursue my own. In college, I began to rebel against that narrative, venturing into art and creative writing. I thought it could give me purpose. Sarah felt a kinship his experience echoed her struggles to carve out her own identity amid others' expectations. As an aspiring storyteller caught in the whirlwind of financial constraints, she recognized the echoes of her life in his revelation. But then, reality caught up with me, he said, his brows knitting together in frustration.
The art world isn't always forgiving.
I had to pivot back into finance to pay the bills. It felt like a betrayal not just to my dreams, but to myself.
Did you feel trapped?
Sarah asked, suddenly aware of how this shared dialogue both deepened their connection and revealed the complexities of their ambitions. More like I was caught in my own double life, he replied, leaning closer as if sharing a secret. It was during that time that I learned to balance both worlds. I started to explore ways of integrating storytelling into finance.
And it's why I believe in you, Sarah. You hold a unique perspective. Your desire for creativity can breathe new life into a traditionally rigid space.
Jake's words resonated like the first chords of a stirring melody, igniting in her a burgeoning belief that her dreams could transcend expectation, just as his had. Yet the deeper she probed into these possibilities, the more she sensed the latent wounds in Jake's experiences.
What do you want now?
She dared to ask, testing the waters of his vulnerabilities.
I want to find that balance, he confessed, but I also want to venture back into the arts. I'm tired of living in the shadows of what I could have done.
Maybe mentoring others could be a way to reclaim that.
An unexpected wave of clarity passed through her.
Jake's hesitations, his drift between paths, they crystallized something within her. The urgency she felt to break free from her past didn't just shoot through her ambition, it intertwined with a desire to help others cultivate their own potential, just as Jake had transformed himself.
Maybe it's time we both take those risks together, she proposed impulsively. Let us hold each other accountable.
The idea hung in the air, buoyed by the weight of their untested bond.
It could lead them down paths tangled with uncertainty and fear, yet also brimming with the potential for growth, but as excitement coursed through her, another thought bubbled to the surface: what if fear held them back? Would they be ready to confront the portions of themselves that still clung to illusions of safety?
As Jake regarded her, the air thick with the potential of their pact, Sarah couldn't shake the sense that they were navigating currents far deeper than they could currently imagine. Their ambitions and fears intertwined, but they had yet to confront the shadows lurking in the background, the external pressures that could define or fracture their paths entirely.
What if we fail?
She whispered, testing the cold reality that loomed.
That's the question we both need to answer, he said quietly, the challenge clear in his eyes, and just like that, the battle for their destinies hung in the balance, teetering between chance and chaos. What would they risk to truly lift themselves from the shadows? Would they have the courage to face their fears, or would those fears entrap them in their own stories forever?
Sarah's heart raced, a blend of fear and exhilaration flooding her senses.
The question that lingered hung over her like a storm cloud, dark and heavy.
As she looked into Jake's eyes, she could see a fierce determination battling against deep-seated doubts.
It was a mirror to her own internal struggle, a battle against the remnants of her past that whispered she wasn't enough. She had felt stagnant for too long in her job at the diner, serving tables rather than pursuing the narratives that played out in her mind. What if this moment with Jake was the catalyst she needed to propel herself forward, to step into the person she yearned to be?
Let us make a list, Sarah proposed.
The words spilled out before she could process them, but they felt right. Let us write down what we want specifically.
Not just success or balance, but tangible steps we can take to start making it happen.
Jake cocked his brow, the anticipation mingling with curiosity. Like a vision board?
More like a roadmap, she clarified, her voice gaining a steadiness she didn't quite expect.
We can hold each other accountable for every step. It'll be tangible proof that we're committed to changing our stories. She watched as Jake mulled over her suggestion, shifting in his chair. This was not just about emotional connection, it was about action.
If they were to escape the confines their pasts had imposed, they needed to forge new paths with clarity and purpose.
All right, let us do it, he replied, a flicker of excitement igniting in his eyes. They began to write. Each item on the list propelled them deeper into self-reflection.
Sarah began with her aspirations for storytelling: long nights crafting tales, workshops to hone her voice, perhaps even a mentor to guide her through the chaotic landscape of publishing. She could feel the resonance of her dreams pulsating on the page, a stark contrast against the monotony of her current existence. As Jake contributed his own goals: mentorship, returning to art, finding a creative outlet that merged with his finance skills. Sarah felt an invisible thread tightening between them. They were bound not only by their vulnerabilities but by a shared commitment to move beyond them, yet with every line on the paper came a fresh wave of anxiety. What would happen when they faced the reality of their ambitions? Sarah could already sense the people around her viewing her aspirations as far-fetched. Doubts from friends, raised eyebrows from family, and the pervasive nagging of her own insecurities.
Would the support from Jake be enough to withstand the pressures weighty enough to crumble dreams? Are we really going to do this? She asked, voice faltering as the enormity of their plans settled in. The words reached out like a lifeline, demanding affirmation.
Yes, Jake said, his confidence steadying her wavering resolve.
But we need to address our fears head-on. What's the worst that could happen? The silence that followed felt oppressive. Sarah dipped her head, replaying their earlier conversation.
Failure.
Disappointment. Living out their lives in regret. Taking a breath, she flipped the script in her mind, focusing on ambition instead of trepidation. We'll fail, sure. But then we learn, right? That's growth. Jake nodded, the energy in the room shifting from concern to possibility as their ambitions unfurled before them. Let us promise to support each other through failure, too. It's part of the process, he said, capturing her renewed hope like a photograph. Both of them now stood at a precipice, gazing into the unknown future. The stakes had never been higher. This partnership could lead them toward growth or unravel into a chaotic spiral of disappointment. As the reality of their pact settled in, a new thought pierced through her excitement. Did they have enough courage to face the storms ahead? The whispers of doubt that had long haunted her mind stirred again, a haunting reminder of what they were truly risking. What if we are facing something more than just our dreams? What if confronting our past has unforeseen consequences? Sarah said. Quietly, realization clashing against optimism, the weight of her words filled the space between them as Jake met her gaze. We can't know until we try, he replied, the determination in his voice firm yet fragile. And with that, the commitment was sealed, a leap into uncertainty that would demand everything of them. Would they rise, or would the darkness consume them both? The journey ahead was bound to be tumultuous, stretching their limits in ways they never anticipated. But as Sarah glanced at their list, now a burgeoning map of ambition, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they were finally ready to step into the stories they were meant to live. The next chapter loomed ahead, pulsing with the promise of unresolved conflicts. What would happen when reality collided with their plans? Would they bend or break beneath the weight of those expectations? The anticipation hung heavily, inviting them to confront what lay in the shadows. Sarah awoke the next morning with a sense of trepidation dancing in her chest. The solid list they had created together felt somehow both empowering and suffocating. As the sunlight seeped into her room, illuminating the stark walls, anxiety wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. What had she gotten herself into? She sat up and turned on her phone, scrolling through the Notes app where their roadmap lay. Each plan confronted her like a specter from her past. Workshops, mentorships, the word publishing flashed like a warning sign. Her heart sank. Was she truly capable of pursuing something so far removed from her current reality? She had always been the girl in the background, serving coffee, not crafting stories to eye in the diner. The familiar chaos welcomed her with open arms. The clattering of dishes and the sound of sizzling bacon were comforting, yet they only amplified her growing discontent. Each customer who walked through the door felt like a reminder of who she hadn't yet become. She moved through the motions of the day, pouring coffee and taking orders, her mind tangled in the web of aspirations and what-ifs. Jake's text chimed through the frenetic din, jolting her from her spiraling thoughts. I've been thinking about our list. Let us meet tonight. I want to brainstorm more specific steps. Excitement mingled with nervousness as she nodded at the thought of possibility. Their conversation could either fuel her ambitions or plunge her deeper into doubt. She wondered if she could truly open up about her fears. That evening, they met at a quiet cafe, a space far removed from the diner's buzz. As they settled into their seats, the mood felt palpable, elevated by their shared purpose. Jake was animated, flipping through articles he had printed about writing workshops and local meetups for aspiring authors. Sarah felt a spark of excitement, a tiny flame igniting within her, yet doubt clawed at her resolve. What if no one takes me seriously? She confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I'm just playing pretend? Jake leaned in closer, the sincerity in his eyes undeniably compelling. What makes you think you're not enough? You have a story to tell, and your voice deserves to be heard. It doesn't need validation from anyone else. Her defenses crumbled as she silently confronted the years of self-imposed limitations. In those moments, she realized that the story she had held onto, one of insignificance, had unraveled far too easily. Desire and fear fought a battleground inside her. She thought of the young girl who spent hours lost in books, who dreamed of worlds waiting for her pen to bring them to life. Can we go to that workshop together? She blurted out, surprised by the conviction behind the words. The fear still gnawed at her, but the prospect of facing it alongside Jake felt like a lifeline. Definitely, he replied without missing a beat. But don't stop there. Let us set a timeline for this.
By the end of the month, you should have your first draft done.
A knot tightened in her stomach at the thought of a deadline. An entire draft? What if it was terrible?
But there was something liberating in that fear. It dared her to embrace the unknown. As they jotted down more actionable goals, Sarah felt a shift within herself. Their partnership was not just a comfort, it demanded her to step up and confront what scared her most. The prospect of failing loomed larger, but the possibility of uncovering her hidden talents felt equally daunting. The weight of her decisions pressed heavily as they left the cafe. Could she navigate this treacherous path through self-discovery and ambition? Could she transform from waitress to storyteller? Later that night, as she lay in bed, Sarah stared at the ceiling, the shadows dancing against the walls. The echoes of doubt had evolved. Now they whispered not just warnings but invitations. What lay just beyond her fears was entirely unknown. In the stillness of the night, she felt a new understanding creeping in. Facing her ambitions wouldn't merely be a journey of self-discovery, it would also surface the hidden strengths she had buried. But what other truths would be unveiled along the way? As she navigated her personal evolution, she couldn't shake the feeling that the past would soon reveal itself in unexpected ways. With a renewed sense of determination, she fell into a restless sleep, visions of characters and stories fluttering just beyond her conscious grasp. Would her courage translate into action, or would the weight of the past hold her back? The next day loomed, bright and brimming with possibilities both daunting and exhilarating. Sarah woke the next morning with a quiet resolve hovering like the morning mist outside her window. The burden of uncertainty still lingered, but it had shifted subtly overnight into a mixture of anticipation and dread. Over her usual cup of coffee, she stared at the list they had crafted, now framing her ambitions as both a challenge and a promise. The diner buzzed around her, familiar yet strangely foreign. Each customer's laughter felt like a ripple against the fortress of her dreams, the contrast leaving her unsettled. The orders came in a flurry, yet every plate she delivered became a reminder of her choice to pursue something greater. As she wiped down the counter, Sarah sensed an inner dialogue unfolding. What if she could weave her tales like the threads of stories she had cherished for so long? Hadn't she been setting the stage for something magnificent all along? This was the first day of her proposed timeline, the day she had agreed to draft her first story. Yet, as the day wore on, her impulse to write warred with fear. What if her words faltered? What if the characters that populated her imagination vanished like morning dew? She pushed the thought aside with a sigh, focusing instead on the ringing of the diner's bell, an invitation behind each entrance. During lunch, Jake appeared, bringing an infusion of energy into the otherwise mundane rhythm of her shift. He slid into the booth with a conspiratorial grin. "I brought something for you." Before she could ask, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook, placing it gently before her. "This is a writing journal. Every time you sit down to work on your draft, jot down any ideas that come to mind here." Sarah's heart fluttered. The simple gesture encapsulated both accountability and encouragement. "Thank you," she whispered, the weight of gratitude mixing with a newfound excitement. Holding the notebook ignited the flickering flame inside her again. Perhaps this would mark her transition from observer to creator. After finishing their coffee, they made plans to meet for their first writing session later that week. But now, Sarah felt an urgency brewing. If she didn't start writing soon, would the momentum dissipate? As her shift came to an end, she felt a determination settle into her bones. Once home, she hesitated at the door, notebook in hand. Comfort pulled at her, urging her to retreat into the familiarity of mindless television or a book. But the thought of Jake's unwavering belief turned her resolve solid. Settling at her small kitchen table, she opened the notebook, staring at the blank first page. What was she afraid of? The story buzzed in her head, the characters vying for a chance to breathe life onto the page. With each stroke of the pen, she felt herself transforming. The knots in her chest began to unravel with every word, a catharsis enveloping her spirit as the characters spilled out like a long-forgotten treasure. Soon, she was lost in the world she created, and the anxiety that had once held her hostage now morphed into liberation. But the fleeting tranquility shattered upon facing a new reality. Were these scenes good enough? Would they resonate or dissolve into the ether? As if the universe conspired against her progress, the blank page loomed once more, now dripping with doubt. As the sun dipped low, casting shadows through her window, Sarah realized she had only scratched the surface of this journey. Creativity demanded not just effort but the integrity of her vulnerability. Just as she began to piece together her narrative, her phone pinged one last message from Jake. "Can't wait to hear about what you're working on. Remember, this is just a draft. No pressure. Just write. We'll discuss it soon." His words wrapped around her, whispering encouragement but also challenging her to face what lay beneath her initial excitement: a fear of criticism, a fear of showing the world who she truly was. She set the notebook aside, heart racing as a new thought washed over her. She could not allow her insecurities to dictate her narrative anymore. It was time to embrace the discomfort. With a deep breath, she collected her thoughts, ready to dive deeper into herself and unearth the stories that awaited her. What journey awaited her as the layers began to peel back? What further revelations would strip her of her comfort? The path of uncovering her voice had only just begun. The next morning, rays of sunlight streamed through Sarah's window, illuminating the pages she had filled with her writing the night before. She awoke with a sense of purpose, a subtle shift in her perspective. The shadows of doubt had receded slightly, replaced by a growing determination to embrace her ambitions. She had articulated her thoughts into words, each sentence carrying the weight of her dreams. As Sarah arrived at the diner, she felt emboldened. The clamor of coffee pots and the chatter of patrons were now mere background music to the symphony of creativity that had begun to play in her mind. With each order she took, she caught glimpses of lives intertwined with stories waiting to be told. No longer did she merely serve. Now, she engaged, deriving inspiration from the human experiences unfolding around her. That evening, her writing session with Jake was unlike any she had anticipated. He arrived with a stack of articles and resources that ignited another spark in her. They dove into discussions about narrative structures, character arcs, and the importance of authenticity. This wasn't just about storytelling anymore, it was about defining their identities and frameworks for their futures. Jake's unwavering belief in her capabilities fueled her passion. Similarly, Sarah's intrinsic motivation inspired him to reconnect with his own creative roots. As they tackled her draft, Sarah unveiled her vulnerabilities and instincts. What if it's not good enough? She confessed, the age-old question rearing its head again. Yet, instead of the usual spiral of self-doubt, she sensed a shift in her inner dialogue. This time, she recognized the opportunity to evolve. What if it's simply a first step? Jake prompted. Every expert was once a beginner. And in that moment of honest exchange, with the weight of mutual understanding between them, she felt a veil lift. She began to view each word as an exploration rather than a judgment. Weeks flew by. Their brainstorming sessions, once tentative, morphed into dynamic exchanges where ideas bounced freely, filling them both with enthusiasm. Sarah embraced vulnerability as part of her crafting process. She shared her darkest fears and the nuances behind her characters. Each snippet of honesty served to deepen their bond, a commitment to hold each other accountable not only for their professional aspirations but also for their personal fears. As she savored her first finished draft, she felt the contours of her identity sharpen. She no longer identified solely as a waitress but as a storyteller on the cusp of her blossoming career. With the parchment of her aspirations laid before her, she sought out workshops where she met fellow aspiring writers, networking her way into creative circles she never imagined entering. Every story she heard, every connection she made, transformed her narrative tapestry. The day of her first writing workshop arrived, and she stood before a group of participants, their aspirations mirroring her own. They were eager faces, hungry for knowledge, each with a tale to tell. Sarah felt the weight of her experiences coalesce into something tangible. She was not just a participant, she was a mentor within the community of her peers. The workshop turned into a galvanizing experience, not just for her but also for Jake, who attended out of genuine support and curiosity. They collaborated on feedback, exchanging perspectives on their narratives, entwining their paths in a way they both realized would reshape their futures. One afternoon, during a quiet moment at the cafe after a particularly uplifting workshop, Sarah glanced over at Jake. "Thank you for being there for me," she said softly, "you really helped me break through." He smiled, a warmth radiating between them. And you helped me reconnect with the passion I thought I'd lost, he replied, the sincerity echoing in his voice. For the first time, they weren't just two individuals navigating ambitions but partners fanning the flames of transformation, recognized in the shared labor of their creativity. As summer faded, an unexpected breakthrough came when Sarah found an opportunity to pitch her work to a local publisher. Heart racing, she navigated the nerves that fluttered in her chest. When she left the meeting, she felt renewed. Whether or not she secured a deal mattered less than what she had just accomplished. She had confronted her fears, sought the support of a trusted confidant, and had created something from the depths of her soul. Months later, success began to unfold in ways she had never imagined. The emotional threads woven through her stories resonated deeply within the community, which rallied around her work. Each positive response solidified her identity not just as a dreamer, but as a creator embraced by the tapestry of those other stories she once only served from behind the counter. With newfound confidence, Sarah realized her journey had transformed her own narrative. She had gone from exhaustion to empowerment, from doubt to clarity, each chapter interspersed with remarkable moments of growth. She wasn't merely filling orders at a diner, she was crafting stories that would uplift others, just as she had once been uplifted by an unexpected encounter. As she reflected on her path, Sarah smiled. She had confronted the weight of her past and emerged into a future intertwined with purpose. She viewed her life as a vibrant tapestry, threads of ambition and perseverance intricately intertwined. The world around her blossomed afresh, a mosaic of possibilities, and she was finally ready to step boldly into it. To those of you who resonate with Sarah's journey, now is the time to take charge of your aspirations. If you found inspiration in her transformation, subscribe immediately to the channel to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that could change lives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and uplift voices like Sarah's. Your support matters. Don't just watch, comment your thoughts and theories about her journey. And share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need that extra push, because real change begins with the willingness to uplift one another. This is your moment to show your support. Don't hesitate. ACT now.